So if you've listened to Boris Johnson's recent speech, Build Back Better, the same phrase that Joe Biden is using, they didn't make that up, by the way. This is the brainchild. The Build Back Better is a slogan for the Great Reset, and the Great Reset is the brainchild of the World Economic Forum. And the man behind the curtain of the World Economic Forum is Klaus Schwab, and I mentioned him in a couple of videos, and also Spiro Skouras has talked about him. And it's becoming clear, right, that our world leaders are going to start transitioning from talking and worrying about COVID and then eventually start saying environmentalism kind of thing. So they want to push the Green New Deal, green agenda, which is ultimately control. If you look at it closely, it's in control of every aspect of your life. It's in control of your movement. It's in control of the economy. It's not a pretty world to live in, actually. But it ultimately comes back to Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which is a plan for the 21st century. I mean, if you look at it there, this is directly on the intelligence.weforum.org. I mean, it's just this huge spider web, lattice work of interconnected plans that they have. They'll control everything. So you can actually sign up to this. You can get information about what they have planned. I mean, it's all sold to you as wonderfully optimistic, but their plans include like civil participation, LGBTI inclusion, human rights, taxation, inclusive design, artificial intelligence, future of media, entertainment and culture, digital identity, future of computing, quantum computing, fourth industrial revolution, digital economy and new value creation. Yes, a social credit system on steroids with internet of everything, constant surveillance, absolutely no privacy, internet governance, 5G, blockchain, drones, the digital transformation of business, vaccination, cities and urbanization, financial and monetary systems, sustainable development. That's that phrase again. Again, sustainable development goals is Agenda 2030. Biodiversity, future of health and healthcare, aviation and travel and tourism, banking and capital markets. They want to redefine, redevelop, completely off from the ground up, absolutely everything. Development, finance, international trade and investment, global governance. That's the big one, of course, is the one world government. Public finance and social protection, climate change, COVID-19 is in there, and it apparently was in there pretty quick after, very, very early on. Let's just say very early on when this website was made, at a very early point in this year, that was just dropped right in there. International security, global health, global risks, agile governance, eco-economics, workforce and employment, future of eco-economic progress, geopolitics, leadership in the fourth industrial revolution, plastics and the environment, batteries. Are they leaving out anything? Circular economy, 3D printing, advanced manufacturing and production, air pollution, corporate governance, future of food. Got to get that one in there. He who controls the food supply controls the people. Environment and natural resource security, the ocean, future of energy, Green New Deals, forests, future of mobility, systemic racism, justice and law. Yeah, it's all there. I mean, we've done a full loop there. And if you click on any one of these things, it brings up more information. It's very, very detailed, and it goes on and on and on. But so basically, if you control absolutely everything that human beings need, everything that they can do, and everything that they use, unsurprisingly, you will eventually control all of humanity, or at least that's their plan. So it gives you a little bit of a flavor of the Great Reset, and it's, basically totalitarianism. So I want to get into this article from Winter Oak on Klaus Schwab. Let's just dive in. Gran Torino has already gone through this. I figured we would give this a signal boost on my channel as well. So, born in Ravensburg in 1938, Klaus Schwab is a child of Adolf Hitler's Germany, a police state regime built on fear and violence, on brainwashing and control, on propaganda and lies, on industrialism and eugenics, on dehumanization and disinfection, on a chilling and grandiose vision of a new order that would last 1,000 years. Schwab seems to have dedicated his life to reinventing that nightmare and trying to turn it into a reality, not just for Germany, but for the whole world. Worse still, as his own words confirm time and time again, his technocratic fascist vision is also a twisted transhumanist one, which will merge humans and with machines in curious mixes of digital and analog life, sounds like the Borg, which will infect our bodies with smart dust, and in which the police will apparently be able to read our brains. Delightful. And as we will see, he and his accomplices are using the COVID-19 crisis to bypass democratic accountability, to override opposition, to accelerate their agenda, and to impose it on the rest of humankind against our will in what he terms a great reset. Schwab is not, of course, a Nazi in the classic sense, being neither a nationalist nor an anti-Semite, as testified by the $1 million Dan David Prize he was awarded by Israel in 2004. But in 21st century fascism has found different political forms through which to continue its core project of reshaping humanity to suit capitalism through blatantly authoritarian means. This new fascism is today being advanced in the guise of global governance, biosecurity, the new normal, the New Deal for nature, and the fourth industrial revolution. And this was something that myself and James Corbett talked about with the biosecurity element of it, that actually in the wake of this pandemic and the future pandemics that we're supposed to be experiencing, because apparently the World Health Organization and all these kind of entities can just predict the future, right? As that saying goes, if you want to predict the future, invent it, or something like that. But as James was saying, the future of healthcare is not going to be healthcare as we know it, the right to actually have healthcare, but more that you're going to be concerned about your biosafety or biosecurity. And so it's this sort of trade between, well, once you could go to a hospital and make sure you got care, but now actually your biosecurity and being safe from these bioweapons or the next pandemic, that's actually going to be more important, and you've got to make sure that you're sufficiently vaccinated and that you're up to the latest vaccine standards and that your health passport is up to date and all that kind of thing. And so a lot of people will think that that's more important than their own healthcare, and of course that's putting a lot of people at risk by not getting the care that they actually need. And that's exactly what we've seen, is that people who are in need of care and people who need cancer treatments and everything else are not getting it because the pandemic is coming first. They're trying to get you to focus on non-problems and take those more seriously than your actual health. Schwab, the octogenarian founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, sits at the center of this matrix like a spider on a giant web. The original fascist project in Italy and Germany was all about a merger of state and business, while communism envisages the takeover of business and industry by the government, which theoretically acts in the interest of the people. Yeah, sorry about that. It doesn't. Fascism was all about using the state to protect and advance the interests of the wealthy elite. I have to be honest, I'm in a little bit of disagreement with the author. I think that actually what the Great Reset would ultimately do is actually push global communism, but we'll disagree and just agree on the fact that it is entirely, that both would be, both fascism and communism are totalitarian in their nature. Schwab was continuing his approach in a denazified post-World War II context when in 1971 he founded the European Management Forum, which held annual meetings in Davos in Switzerland. Here, he promoted his ideology of stakeholder capitalism, or as he calls it, stakeholder capitalism, in which businesses were brought into closer cooperation with government. Stakeholder capitalism is described by Forbes Business Magazine as the notion that a firm focuses on meeting the needs of all its stakeholders, customers, employees, partners, the community, and society as a whole. Even in the context of a particular business, it is invariably an empty label. As the Forbes article notes, it actually only means that firms can go on privately shoveling money to their stakeholders, to their shareholders and executives, while maintaining a public front of exquisite social sensitivity and exemplary altruism. Sounds like virtue signaling, right? But in general social context, the stakeholder concept is even more nefarious, discarding any idea of democracy, rule by the people, in favor of rule by corporate interests. Society is no longer regarded as a living community, but as a business whose profitability is the sole valid aim of human activity. Schwab set out his agenda back in 1971 in his book. I'm not going to try and pronounce the German, but the translation is Modern Enterprise Management in Mechanical Engineering, where his use of the term stakeholders effectively redefined human beings not as citizens, free individuals, or members of communities, but as secondary participants in a massive commercial enterprise. The aim of each and every person's life was to achieve long-term growth and prosperity. Growth of what, I remember hearing this for so many years, it's like we would have this beautiful countryside around us, and then a terrible housing estate will be built, what I call sort of a stack-em high rabbit hutch Agenda 2030 housing, or a god-awful industrial complex for some multinational is only here to pay low corporation tax. And then say, well, this is progress, it's all progress. It's like, it's just a throwaway remark. It's just a line. What do you mean by progress? Progressing towards what? Progressing towards paving and concreting over our beautiful scenery, our beautiful nature. How is that environmental, right? How is that, genuinely concern for biodiversity or ecology or the environment? We're just absolutely destroying the place. But of course, it's all ultimately about money and power. Effectively redefined human beings not as citizens, free individuals, or members of communities, but as secondary participants in a massive commercial enterprise. So it says, the aim of each and every person's life was to achieve long-term growth and prosperity for this enterprise. In other words, to protect and increase the wealth of the capitalist elite. This all became even clearer in 1987 when Schwab renamed his European Management Forum to the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum describes itself on its own website as the global platform for public-private cooperation, with admirers describing how it creates partnerships between businessmen, politicians, intellectuals, and other leaders of society to define, discuss, and advance key issues on the global agenda. All people that we didn't elect to do this. The partnerships which the World Economic Forum creates are aimed at replacing democracy with a global leadership of hand-picked and unelected individuals whose duty is not to serve the public, but to impose the rule of the 1% on that public with as little interference from the rest of us as possible. In the books, Schwab writes, for public consumption, he expresses himself in the two-faced cliches of corporate spin and greenwashing. The same empty terms are dished up time and time again. In Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, a guide to building a better world, Schwab talks of the inclusion of stakeholders and the distributing of benefits and of sustainable and inclusive partnerships. God, those are two words I'm really sick of. Sustainable, inclusive, which will lead us all to an inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous future. Behind this bluster, and that's all it is. It's just, buzzwords. Behind this bluster, the real motivation behind his stakeholder capitalism, which he was still relentlessly promoting at the World Economic Forum's 2020 Davos conference, is profit and exploitation. For instance, in his 2016 book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, Schwab writes about the Uberization of work and the consequent advantages for companies, particularly fast-growing startups in the digital economy. And he says, this is a quote from the book, and there's a lot of quotes directly from Schwab. As human cloud platforms classify workers as self-employed, they are for the moment free of the requirement to pay minimum wages, employer taxes, and social benefits. The same capitalist callousness shines through in his attitude towards people nearing the end of their working lives and in need of a well-deserved rest. And this is the thing that breaks my heart, the idea of raising the retirement age of the elderly who are vulnerable, prone to sickness, obviously, and should be living out in comfort and without stress. They should be finally free to have the winter of their years to themselves instead of still being meat for the corporate grinder, so to speak. And this boils my blood, but here's a quote from Schwab. Aging is an economic challenge because unless retirement ages are drastically increased so that older members of society can continue to contribute to the workforce, an economic imperative that has many economic benefits, the working age population falls at the same time as the percentage of dependent elders increases. You can see how little he thinks of humanity. It's just something to be collated and analyzed economically and quantified in terms of, the metric of money and I guess exploitation. So everything in this world is reduced to economic challenges, economic imperatives, and economic benefits for the ruling capitalist class. The myth of progress has long been used by the 1% to persuade people to accept the technologies designed to exploit and control us, and Schwab plays on this when he declares that the Fourth Industrial Revolution, again this is a quote, represents a significant source of hope for continuing the climb in human development that has resulted in dramatic increases in quality of life for billions of people since 1800. You can stuff your Fourth Industrial Revolution. It sounds like the enslavement of all mankind. He enthuses, while it may not feel momentous to those of us experiencing a series of small but significant adjustments to life on a daily basis, it is not a minor change. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is a new chapter in human development, on par with the First, Second, and Third Industrial Revolutions, once again driven by the increasing availability of interaction of a set of extraordinary technologies. But he is well aware that technology is not ideologically neutral, as some like to claim. Technologies and societies shape each other, he says. After all, technologies are tied up in how we know things, how we make decisions, and how we think about ourselves and each other. Well, one example of that would be the biosecurity, the digital IDs and biometrics, but also things like, for example, the use of police drones, things like facial recognition technology and things like that. There's most definitely benefits of technology. I've been a tech channel for long enough to understand it, but I've seen what's been going on with consumer technology for a long time. And ultimately, I'm starting to wonder if a lot of these technologies that have been made so readily available, so ubiquitous, and so relatively cheap for consumers in the Western world, have in fact just simply been designed to get us invested into a population control grid. The idea that the telescreen in 1984 was not foisted upon people. At least today, it seems that people are actually inviting it into their homes with things like smart speakers and, Alexa or whatever it is. You can talk to these digital assistants, and I think it's crazy because they're listening. They're listening to you. Our devices are literally spying on us, and they're designed to do just that. And now they sort of want to break us of this idea that privacy matters. It's sort of like, what do you have to hide, Why do you want to go to the beach and for an hour on your own and just read a book, Why do you want to do that? What book are you reading? How long are you going to be there? Who are you going to be with? What chapter are you on? What's the book about? Why that book? Everything. They want to know absolutely everything about you. And I just, the only little bit of freedom you have left is in your head, but they want to come for that as well. And I know it sounds crazy, but I actually have a clip from the World Economic Forum in which they talk about this fourth industrial revolution or whatever. And one of the people actually talks about getting access to people's thoughts. And it's like,
one of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotion, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
I'm not saying that they can actually do these things technologically, but they can do a hell of a lot, and I will say this later on, they can do a hell of a lot of damage to us in their attempt to bring about the world that they want. And that's always the danger with why are utopian visions so dangerous? Because they're usually unachievable. Right? And they usually ultimately have a nefarious goal behind them. But the damage that utopian ideas of, say, for example, communism can do to us, it's, some people start out with good intentions. I don't think that these people have good intentions, if I'm perfectly honest, but a lot of people start out with good intentions, and it's like, ultimately, well, the road to hell and all that. So they are connected to our identities, worldviews, and potential futures. From nuclear technologies to the space race, smartphones, social media, cars, medicine, and infrastructure, the meaning of technologies makes them political. Even the concept of a developed nation implicitly rests on the adoption of technologies and what they mean for us economically and socially. Technology for the capitalists behind it has never been about social good, but purely about profit, and Schwab makes it quite clear that the same remains true for this fourth industrial revolution. He enthuses fourth industrial revolution technologies are truly disruptive. I hate when they use that phrase. They upend existing ways of sensing, calculating, organizing, acting, and delivering. They represent entirely new ways of creating value for organizations and citizens. I'm at a stage now where I just want to grow vegetables and just live off the grid or something on a farm somewhere. I don't want, it's Computing Forever is the name of the channel, but I'm like, I think it's more a case now that the name relates to the fact that the world does not compute on many levels. Not logically anyway. In case the meaning of creating value was not clear, he gives some examples. Drones represent a new type of cost-cutting employee working among us and performing jobs that once involved real people, and the use of ever smarter algorithms is rapidly extending employee productivity, for example, in the use of chatbots to augment and increasingly replace live chat support for customer interactions. And you'll go on and on like this as the article continues, that Schwab's whole thing is just replace people where possible with machines, to the point where, and I've said this many years ago, they come for the blue collar work goes first, then white collar work is just sort of the last domino to fall. It takes a little bit longer, but eventually the developers who are programming the algorithms will eventually be replaced by much smarter AI and algorithms themselves at a later point. So they're actually going to put themselves out of business. But it's like if physically human beings are not required in the fourth industrial revolution, and intellectually they're not required. Well, then what are they going to do? Just have leisure or something? I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's very clear that I think there's certain people in this world perhaps looking at the population of the planet going, do we need it to be so large? That's all I'm saying. What is the point if... I remember this... it was Elon Musk who once said in a tweet that he's getting increasingly concerned that human beings are nothing but a biological bootloader for a digital superintelligence. I don't like the idea of, we've had our day, we're coming to the end of it now. It's very interesting, isn't it, that Europeans have they're being indoctrinated by the media and by globalists to believe, and indeed the far left already seem to believe this, that Europeans sort of had their time and that it's time now to sort of hand the keys off to the developed world and have all this mass immigration in our countries. And also there's this sort of, it's like they're trying to create this jadedness for humanity itself, that the future of mankind is, well, there isn't one. It's a post-humanity, the transhumanist agenda. It's like our species kind of dying out. We can't continue like this, lads. We have to get upgraded and become like the Borg and become cyborgs now and have brain chips. Now we have to. Like, come on, lads, now. And I was just thinking, these people are like scream at someone, go, why aren't you wearing a mask? Why aren't you wearing a mask? It's why aren't you wearing a mask today? And then eventually it's why aren't you vaccinated? You're putting everybody at risk. And then it'll be where's your chip? Oh my God, it'll go from like, oh, are you an anti-vaxxer? They use this phrase in a derogatory fashion. And then it'll be, oh, you're an anti-chipper. Oh my God, that's cringe. There's so many anti-chippers. Oh my God. So you're against people getting chipped and kids being chipped. I suppose that you want us to go back to black and white televisions and dial up. Is that it? Huh. I suppose you want us to go back to the horse-drawn plough. Beware of people who are obsessed with progress. That's all I'm saying. When people are living in Matrix-type pods, just plugged in at the back, and that's their whole life in virtual reality. Like, we can't go back. I mean, come on, it's mad. Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back. Despite what Boris Johnson is saying in his recent speech, we can't go back. We have to go forward kind of thing. That we had problems before and COVID has enabled us to kind of, deal with those issues. And it's kind of like, whoa, no. I don't care what your Great Reset, Build Back Better, Green New Deal bollocks is. We just want to go back. And governments cannot be operating autonomously, kicking and screaming their population into some glorious revolution, comrade. Not without their consent. And the British people need to get a hold of that guy and put him straight and just say, look, we put you in power for a reason to do a job. Okay? We give the orders, not you. And if we do not want to go down the direction you're taking us, that's it. Whether you like it or not, this is how actual democracy works. But they want to get rid of that word, democracy. They want to get rid of the idea that the citizenry actually has any involvement or any contribution to make. But look, we'll go on before I talk more. So he explains, sooner than most anticipate, the work of professions as different as lawyers, financial analysts, doctors, journalists, accountants, insurance underwriters, or librarians may be partly or completely automated. You see, they'll also go after, as I say, the white-collar workers. The technology is progressing so fast that Christian Hammond, co-founder of Narrative Science, a company specializing in automated narrative generation, forecasts that by the mid-2020s, 90% of news could be generated by an algorithm. I well believe that. It feels like it is at the moment. It's just like a copy and paste extrapolation job for a press release. Most of it without any kind of human intervention, apart from the design of the algorithm, of course. It is this economic imperative that informs Schwab's enthusiasm for a revolution that is fundamentally changing the way we live, work, and relate to one another. Schwab waxes lyrical about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which he insists is unlike anything humankind has experienced before. I'm going to have to stop here again and say, Winter Oak, this is a really great article. Thank you very much for putting it together. He gushes, consider the unlimited possibilities of having billions of people connected by mobile devices, giving rise to unprecedented processing power, storage capabilities, and knowledge access. Or think about the staggering confluence of emerging technology breakthroughs covering wide-ranging fields such as artificial intelligence, AI, robotics, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, biotechnology, material science. Do we really need any of this stuff? I have to ask, because as much as I love technology, I'm like, maybe we could take a step back, Maybe we could... Listen, I'd be willing to just go back to like the mid-90s, you know, when it was like difficult to get online, right? When it was like 28K modems. Look, so long as we're freer, I don't care, okay? I just want life to be authentic and human again. And yeah, I wouldn't mind if people just stopped living like this, you know, on their smartphones all day, especially the younger generation. Maybe we could regress, and there would be no shame in it. This idea of, oh, what are you, a Luddite? Oh my God, that's like in an age of scientism and just this sort of tech addiction. The idea of like, yeah, I don't have a smartphone. Well, I do own a smartphone, don't use it. Here you go. This is my daily driver, as they say. It's probably the worst phone I've ever owned, the Nokia 800 Tough. It's awful, but it's not a smartphone. And so there's that benefit to it. I wanted a dumb phone. I've been using dumb phones for quite a few years now. But you know, you kind of go, there's no shame in us deciding. Like, who else judges us, right? It's like we can decide to go back technologically. We're not going to go back in time. We still have the knowledge of what we learned, but we don't have to say, look, if we believe there's negative aspects to the Internet of Things or to facial recognition or biometric IDs, or we think that certain things are just too invasive. Some technologies can genuinely be used, all technology can be used in a negative way, but some are far more conducive to being used for nefarious purposes and can rob us of our privacy and everything else. Maybe we can say, look, do we need this stuff? Maybe we should be getting rid of certain things. Maybe we shouldn't be going down the route. Maybe we should be banning things like microchipping of human beings or genetic modification. GMOs or genetic engineering and things like that. I'm just saying. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. So nanotechnology, biotechnology, materials science, energy storage, and quantum computing, to name a few. Many of these innovations are in their infancy, but they are already reaching an inflection point in their development as they build on and amplify each other in a fusion of technologies across the physical, digital, and biological worlds. Again, those are the words of Klaus Schwab. He also looks forward to more online education involving the use of virtual and augmented reality. So that's more time in which children are expected to just have more of a relationship with technology and not each other, right? They're more antisocial, spending more time indoors, incredibly unhealthy, to dramatically improve educational outcomes. But what about the quality of life? Are we going to talk about that? To sensors installed in homes, clothes, and accessories, no thanks. Cities, transport, and energy networks, and to smart cities with their all-important data platforms. Yes, that's what they want us to live in, smart cities where we just, the Matrix. Actually, when you look at it more deeply, it starts to sound more like the Hunger Games. All things will be smart and connected to the internet, says Schwab, and this will extend to animals as sensors wired in cattle can communicate to each other through a mobile phone network. By cattle, do you mean like animals or human beings? Because they basically see us, these guys see us as cattle by the sense of things. He loves the idea of smart cell factories, which would enable the accelerated generation of vaccines and big data technologies. They suggest we have to stop objecting to businesses profiting from harnessing and selling information about every aspect of our personal lives. Establishing trust in the data and algorithms used to make decisions will be vital. These, he assures us, will deliver new and innovative ways to service citizens and customers, and we will have to stop objecting to businesses profiting from harnessing and selling information about every aspect of our personal lives. Establishing trust in the data and algorithms used to make decisions will be vital, insists Schwab. Citizen concerns over privacy and establishing accountability in business and legal structures will require adjustments in thinking. Adjustments in thinking! That's really disturbing, isn't it? We just need to adjust your thinking. In other words, you're not supposed to care anymore about your privacy. How dare you be so selfish as to want to have any aspect of yourself to yourself, basically. Sorry, but our privacy is a right, and it's essential. And in the same way that people are being told now that their freedom is selfish, your right to go outside and just live normally and to go into a shop or get on public transport without the need of having a mask. You've lost your bodily autonomy. And apparently you're saying, if you don't conform to the groupthink and to the collective derangement, that you're somehow a selfish person. And likewise, the idea of having privacy, having anything to yourself. You must have something to hide. Got to keep an eye on that person. They could be a political dissident. What's going on in their head? What are they planning? This sort of thing. Constant suspicion. This is a step towards being guilty of pre-crime, of course. At the end of the day, it is clear that all this technological excitement revolves purely around profit or value as Schwab prefers to term it in his 21st century corporate newspeak. Thus, blockchain technology will be fantastic and provoke, he says, an explosion in tradable assets, as all kinds of value exchange can be hosted on the blockchain. The use of distributed ledger technology, adds Schwab, could be the driving force behind massive flows of value in digital products and services, providing secure digital identities that can make new markets accessible to anyone connected to the internet. In general, there's nothing here that's transcendent or meaningful or spiritual or beyond the material, beyond the physical for these people. It's one thing you'll find. They're just obsessed with trying to control absolutely everything and everyone. Control freaks. In general, the interest of the fourth industrial revolution for the ruling business elite is that it will create entirely new sources of value and give rise to ecosystems of value creation that are impossible to imagine with a mindset stuck in the third industrial revolution. Oh, God. Those 3IR people. The technologies of the fourth industrial revolution rolled out via 5G pose unprecedented threats to our freedom. As Schwab concedes, the tools of the fourth industrial revolution enable new forms of surveillance and other means of control that run counter to healthy, open societies. But this does not stop him presenting them in a positive light, as when he declares that public crime is likely to decrease due to the convergence of sensors, cameras, AI, and facial recognition software. He describes with some relish how these technologies can intrude into the hitherto private space of our minds, reading our thoughts and influencing our behavior. And likewise, the microchipping of children, for example, at a young age, they'll say, but it's like, you microchip your dog or your cat. You want to make sure that they don't run off or you don't lose them. Aren't children safer when you know where they are and you can track where your kids are? Wouldn't you want to know? So it will be sold in this manner, and you can probably... I'm sure those arguments are already being made today. Schwab predicts, as capabilities in this area improve, the temptation for law enforcement agencies and courts to use techniques to determine the likelihood of criminal activity, assess guilt, or even possibly retrieve memories directly from people's brains will increase. Again, I don't know if they can actually do these kinds of things. I just really want you to understand that when you hear the Great Reset and when you hear Build Back Better and when you hear about this transition from the COVID-19 narrative into the climate change one and the modifications that these fourth industrial revolution people want to bring about to our world and into your life in all the various ways, I need you to know what is ultimately behind the man who is, I guess, the guy behind the curtain of all of this, who's sort of pulling a lot of the strings. Even crossing a national border might one day involve a detailed brain scan to assess an individual's security risk. There are times when the World Economic Forum chief gets carried away by his passion for a sci-fi future in which long-distance human space travel and nuclear fusion are commonplace, and in which the next trending business model might involve someone trading access to his or her thoughts for the time-saving option of typing a social media post by thought alone. Talk of space tourism under the title of Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Final Frontier is almost funny, as is his suggestion that a world full of drones offers a world full of possibilities. Well, I guess by drones now, do you mean human beings? But the further the reader progresses into the world depicted in Schwab's books, the less of a laughing matter it all seems. The truth is that this highly influential figure, and he is a highly influential figure, no matter how outlandish or absurd a lot of this sounds to you, he is influential, he's powerful, and a lot of these guys are getting what they want. At the present time, at least. At the center of the new global order currently being established is an out-and-out transhumanist who dreams of an end to natural, healthy human life and community. Schwab repeats his message time and time again, as if to be sure we have been truly warned. He says, the mind-boggling innovations triggered by the fourth industrial revolution, from biotechnology to AI, are redefining what it means to be human, he writes. The future will challenge our understanding of what it means to be human from both a biological and a social standpoint. Already advances in neurotechnologies and biotechnologies are forcing us to question what it means to be human. Well, what it means to be human is to be human. To be anything else is not. He spells it out in more detail in Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies will not stop at becoming part of the physical world around us. They will become part of us. Indeed, some of us already feel that our smartphones have become an extension of ourselves. Today's external devices, from wearable computers to virtual reality headsets, will almost certainly become implantable in our bodies and brains. Exoskeletons and prosthetics will increase our physical power, while advances in neurotechnology enhance our cognitive abilities. I just got to stop at this point. If you think at any point that they would use this technology to control people's minds, Do you think that they would have any kind of moral resistance to that? They go, oh, well, let's not go that far. Yeah, don't be taking the brain chips right, when they come along. Yeah, and if someone drives up in a van and offers you candy, yeah, don't get in, okay? It's a trap. We will become better able to manipulate our own genes and those of our children. How about we just stay the way we are? How about that? Oh, because the technology is moving forward. But how about who's in control of the technology? Are we in control of it, or is the technology in control of us? It's just a tool to do things, to get work done. Or maybe we should just focus on a meaningful life and a life of authenticity and beauty and a genuinely natural human existence. I'd like to live that way. Is there a planet for people who aren't insane, who don't want to live in your hellish, freakish cyborg universe? These developments raise profound questions. Where do we draw the line between human and machine? What does it mean to be human? Again, to be human is to be human. To be anything else is not. A whole section of this book is devoted to the theme of altering the human being. Here he drools over the ability of new technologies to literally become part of us and invokes a cyborg future involving curious mixes of digital and analog life that will redefine our very natures, turning us into something that we're not. He writes, these technologies will operate within our own biology and change how we interface with the world. They are capable of crossing the boundaries of body and mind, enhancing our physical abilities and even having a lasting impact on life itself, and might be an excellent way of actually controlling the entire population and what they think and believe. No violation seems to go too far for Schwab, who dreams of active implantable microchips that break the skin barrier of our bodies, smart tattoos, which actually Bill Gates has worked on, the digital tattoo, right, subdermal, in order to determine if you're to show if you're basically vaccinated or not. And there's a BBC article about that. He's actually worked on such a thing. I'm not saying it's going to come to pass for the COVID-19 vaccine. That will almost certainly be entirely through, you'll prove your immunity. Well, I'm not going to get it, but you'll prove your immunity through the smartphone app. But the long-term plan, I guess, is to have these smart tattoos, so that we progress beyond the smartphone and incorporate smartphone technology within us. So I guess you're like surfing the internet through your eye or whatever. You have this heads-up display, like a augmented reality in your eyes. Think about Google Glass, but in your head. No thanks. I won't be taking the vaccine. I won't be taking the chips. Thanks very much. Biological computing and custom design organisms. He is delighted to report that sensors, memory switches, and circuits can be encoded in common human gut bacteria, that smart dust arrays of full computers with antennas, each much smaller than a grain of sand, can now organize themselves inside the body, and that implanted devices will likely also help to communicate thoughts normally expressed verbally through a built-in smartphone and potentially unexpressed thoughts or moods by reading brainwaves and other signals. How about we communicate our thoughts and our emotions through our faces like we used to do? But of course, people are wearing face masks now, making it very difficult to see all of the complex series of muscles in the human face to be able to empathize with other people. That's how people normally express themselves, and we've been pretty good at doing that for a very, very long time as human beings. Synthetic biology is on the horizon in Schwab's fourth industrial revolution world, giving the technocratic capitalist rulers of the world the ability to customize organisms by writing DNA. Just sounds like human beings will be seen as just something to experiment on for these people. The idea of neurotechnologies in which humans will have fully artificial memories implanted in the brain is enough to make some of us feel faintly sick, as is the prospect of connecting our brains to VR through cortical modems, implants, or nanobots. This stuff just sounds absolutely farcical, and I've heard this kind of stuff, and people, talk about these as part of various conspiracies or some things that maybe, sometimes people connect certain dots that are not there, and they can go off on a tangent and go down a rabbit hole and everything else, and you kind of come back to what we know, come back to what's more likely. But actually, when you hear someone like Klaus Schwab behind the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum talking about this, and then you look at the strategic intelligence thing that I showed you at the start of this video on the World Economic Forum, and the kinds of the trajectory they want to take us to, and the technology that they're developing. I'm not saying that the time frames are close as to when this kind of stuff is to be implemented, but it does worry you. You start to go, well, it sounds farcical, but we can't dismiss. We at least have to be prepared for the worst, right? We at least have to be prepared for the prospect that something like this would be at least pushed on humanity, regardless of how successful or even plausible any of it is. they might give it a right good go and in the process do a hell of a lot of damage. It is of little comfort to learn that this is all, of course, in the greater interests of capitalist profiteering, since it heralds new industries and systems for value creation and represents an opportunity to create entire new systems of value in the fourth industrial revolution. And what about the bioprinting of organic tissues, or the suggestion that animals could potentially be engineered to produce pharmaceuticals and other forms of treatment? Ethical objections, anyone? It's all evidently good for Schwab, who is happy to announce the day when cows are engineered to produce in its milk blood clotting element, which hemophiliacs lack, is not far off. Researchers have already started to engineer the genomes of pigs with the goal of growing organs suitable for human transplantation. Jesus, please come down anytime now. It gets even more disturbing ever since the sinister eugenics program of the Nazi Germany into which Schwab was born. This science has been deemed beyond the pale by human society, and this should be outlawed. But now, however, he evidently feels eugenics is due a revival, announcing with regard to genetic editing that is now far easier to manipulate with precision the human genome within variable embryos means that we are likely to see the advent of designer babies in the future who possess particular traits or who are resistant to a specific disease. Boy, oh boy, there's just some technological barriers we should never cross. Schwab seems to be hinting at the same future of a superior enhanced artificial transhuman elite separating from the natural born rabble. In other words, you know, the superior, and then what will be seen, like the biologicals, the people who are unmodified will be considered inferior and therefore kind of like a subspecies. In this particularly damning passage from Fourth Industrial Revolution, he says, we are at the threshold of a radical systemic change that requires human beings to adapt continuously. Nah. Who sets that requirement? As a result, we may witness an increasing degree of polarization in the world, marked by those who embrace change versus those who resist it. And there is actually a very important point, because I've read this article before and I don't know when he says it, but talking about the people, you can see this now, the radical left and their obsession with the various social justice causes, Black Lives Matter, LGBT, whatever it is, mass immigration, whatever it might be, all these left-wing socialist causes as well. They are that vanguard, and they're very useful because they're constantly about progress and, you know, smashing the system and all this kind of stuff, and fighting systemic white supremacist, patriarchal, whatever they go on and on and on about. And so those same people will be just corralled, and their revolutionary energies will be directed into pushing for this kind of fourth industrial revolution change. So any of the various goals and principles of the fourth industrial revolution, they will gradually be integrated into those same revolutionary movements in order to push them along. So you have this young vanguard of literal, as they would be described, useful idiots who will help to create more polarization and then shame anyone who's against this change and this necessary progress. And that's how they, again, it's just marked by those who embrace change versus those who resist it, you know. So if you're not moving forward with us, you're part of the problem, whatever. This gives rise to an inequality that goes beyond the societal one described earlier. This ontological inequality will separate those who adapt from those who resist, the material winners and losers in all senses of the words. The winners may even benefit from some form of radical human improvement generated by certain segments of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, such as genetic engineering, from which the losers will be deprived. This risks creating class conflicts and other clashes unlike anything we have seen before. Schwab was already talking about a great transformation back in 2016 and is clearly determined to do everything in his not inconsiderable power to bring about his eugenics-inspired transhumanist world of artificial surveillance, control, and exponential profit. Man, we need a massive EMP to send us back to the Stone Age to stop this this rather dystopian future. But as revealed, but it just sounds like Terminator, you know, minus the time travel. But as revealed by his reference above to class conflicts, he is clearly worried by the possibility of societal resistance and how to advance if technology has received a great deal of resistance from the public. Schwab's annual World Economic Forum shindigs at Davos have long been met by anti-capitalist protesters, and despite the current paralysis of the radical left, he's well aware of the possibility of renewed and perhaps broader opposition to his project, with the risk of resentment, fear, and political backlash. Yeah, most definitely. In his most recent book, he provides historical context, noting that anti-globalization was strong in the run-up to 1914 and up to 1918, and then less so in the 1920s. But it reignited in the 1930s as a result of the Great Depression. He notes that in the early 2000s, the political and societal backlash against globalization relentlessly gained strength. Says that social unrest has been widespread across the world in the past 2 years, citing the Yellow Vests in France, among other movements, and invokes the somber scenario that the same could happen again. Let's hope. So how is an honest technocrat supposed to roll out his preferred future of the world without the agreement of the global public? How can Schwab and his billionaire friends impose their favorite society on the rest of us? One answer is relentless brainwashing propaganda churned out by the mass media and academia owned by the 1% elite, what they like to call a narrative. For Schwab, the reluctance of the majority of humankind to leap aboard his fourth industrial revolution express reflects the tragedy that the world lacks a consistent, positive, and common narrative that outlines the opportunities and challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, a narrative that is essential if we are to empower a diverse set of individuals and communities to avoid a powerful backlash against the fundamental changes underway. Klaus, how about you just feck off? How about that? He adds, it is therefore critical. I had to say feck, but I wanted to say the other one. It is therefore critical that we invest attention and energy in multi-stakeholder cooperation across academic, social, political, national, and in industry boundaries. These interactions and collaborations are needed to create positive, common, and hope-filled narratives. This is why all the corporations talk about the green future, and they all have the that same ideal of the social justice themes of the left. That's why they always go on with the same wokeness. That's why they're all woke. Enabling individuals and groups from all parts of the world to participate in and benefit from the ongoing transformations. So basically, they win people over with bauble rights, and they break people down into their various identity group boxes, and then say, well, if you're this, then we're on board with you because of X, whatever, that kind of thing. So those identity politics groups then get activated. They support and buy into the narrative that the corporation is selling in their advertising and in their products. And as a consequence, they achieve some degree of buy-in into whatever else that the corporation wants to move forward in. And of course, these corporates are all part of, or at least a lot of them, are part of this cabal, this community, sort of what he talks about is cooperation, multi-stakeholder cooperation. So that might be one way in which they intend to do it. It's all part of their propaganda pitch. One of these narratives, at least that's how I'm seeing it anyway, one of these narratives whitewashes the reason for which fourth industrial revolution technology needs to be installed everywhere in the world as soon as possible. Schwab is frustrated that more than half of the world's population across 3.9 billion people still cannot access the internet, with 85% of the population of developing countries remaining offline and therefore out of reach, as compared to 22% in the developed world. I think the Amish have a pretty good life at this stage. I wouldn't mind living like that. The actual aim of the fourth industrial revolution is to exploit these populations for profit via global techno-imperialism, but of course that cannot be stated in the propaganda narrative required to sell the plan. Instead, their mission has to be presented, as Schwab himself does, as a bid to develop technologies and systems that serve to distribute economic and social values such as income, opportunity, and liberty to all stakeholders. You just buy people over with shiny, happy promises of a wonderful world and everything else. So he says here, he piously postures as a guardian of woke liberal values, declaring thinking inclusively goes beyond thinking about poverty or marginalized communities simply as an aberration, something that we can solve. It forces us to realize that our privileges are located on the same map as their suffering. It moves beyond income and entitlements. It's all narrative. It's just narrative based. So he moves on then. The same technique of the fake narrative designed to fool good-thinking citizens into supporting an imperialist capitalist scheme has been used extensively with regard to climate change. As we know, Schwab is a great fan of Greta Thunberg, of course, who had barely stood up from the pavement after her one-girl protest in Stockholm before being whisked off to address the World Economic Forum at Davos. He is also a supporter of the proposed Global New Deal for Nature, particularly via Voice for the Planet, which was launched at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2019 by the Global Shapers, a youth grooming organization created by Schwab in 2011 and aptly described by investigative journalist Cory Morningstar as a grotesque display of corporate malfeasance disguised as good. And it's always the same. They say, it's wonderful the young people are showing such initiative. Yeah, they were groomed into doing it. And it's not like, when you're young, you can really think all that critically. Again, they make all the propaganda is emotional in its nature, in its entire ethos, which is about, emotional propaganda is very, very effective as people just disable their critical reasoning faculties. Children are obviously incredibly impressionable. What else would you expect? In his 2020 book, Schwab actually lays out the way that fake youth activism is being used to advance his capitalist aims. And here we go. This is what I said before. He writes in a remarkably frank passage, youth activism is increasing worldwide, being revolutionized by social media that increases mobilization to an extent that would have been impossible before. It takes many different forms, ranging from non-institutionalized political participation to demonstrations and protests, and addresses issues as diverse as climate change, economic reforms, gender equality, and LGBTQ rights. Again, they get them all on board, and then they get this this vanguard, as they describe. The young generation is firmly at the vanguard of social change. They get them to basically push forward as being the agents of change, so to speak. There is little doubt that it will be the catalyst for change and a source of critical momentum for the Great Reset. You're just being used by the establishment. The young people are being used, being brainwashed and then used. In fact, of course, the ultra-industrial future proposed by Schwab is anything other than green. It's not nature it's interested in, but natural capital and incentivizing investment in green and social frontier markets. Pollution means profit, and the environmental crisis is just another business opportunity, as he details in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. In this revolutionary new industrial system, carbon dioxide turns from a greenhouse pollutant into an asset, and the economics of carbon capture and storage move from being cost as well as pollution sinks, to becoming profitable carbon capture and use production facilities. Even more important, it will help companies, governments, and citizens become more aware of and engage with strategies to actively regenerate nature capital, allowing intelligent and regenerative uses of natural capital to guide sustainable production and consumption and give space for biodiversity to recover in threatened areas. Schwab's solutions to the heartbreaking damage inflicted on our natural world by industrial capitalism involve more of the same poison, except worse. Geoengineering is one of his favorites. Proposals include installing giant mirrors in the stratosphere to reflect the sun's rays, chemically seeding the atmosphere to increase rainfall, and the deployment of large machines to remove carbon dioxide from the air. And if we were to do that, the planet will be a lot less green, because there will be a lot less fuel, carbon dioxide, for plants and trees to do their thing. And he adds, new approaches are currently being imagined through the combination of fourth industrial revolution technologies such as nanoparticles and other advanced materials. Like all the businesses and pro-capitalist NGOs backing the threatened New Deal for nature, Schwab is utterly and profoundly ungreen. For him, the ultimate possibility of clean and sustainable energy includes nuclear fusion, and he looks forward to the day when satellites will blanket the planet with communication pathways that could help connect the more than 4 billion people still lacking online access. It's almost like the internet is sort of being weaponized as a control grid, and they want to make sure that every single person is on it so they can be analyzed, surveilled, quantified as a economic unit of value, I suppose. Schwab also very much regrets all that red tape preventing the unhindered onward march of GM food, genetically modified food, warning that global food security will only be achieved, however, if regulations on genetically modified foods are adapted to reflect the reality that gene editing offers a precise, efficient, and safe method of improving crops. The new order envisaged by Schwab will embrace the entire world, and so global governance is required in order to impose it. As he repeatedly states, his preferred future will only come about through improved global governance. He insists some form of effective global governance is needed. The problem we have today is that a possible global order deficit. He claims, adding improbably, that the World Health Organization is saddled with limited and dwindling resources. What he is really saying is that his fourth industrial revolution, or his Great Reset society, will only function if it imposed simultaneously everywhere on the planet. And what did they just do? It's being imposed under the cover of the COVID pandemic. Otherwise, we will become paralyzed in our attempts to address and respond to global challenges. And this is why quickly. I mean, you saw this with the speeches from Antonio Guterres. They're talking about. They keep saying this. You can just research this for yourself. Don't take it from me. They keep saying, COVID-19 has exposed problems in our society of how we can't react to problems fast enough. Right? This is the global problems require global solutions. They said this with climate change. And they said it with COVID, and they're using COVID as a way to get you on board with, oh yeah, I suppose it really did screw up our lives and our businesses and our social lives and our day-to-day. Maybe we should actually just hand over the keys to our countries to these globalists, to the UN, to whoever. So he continues. He admits, in a nutshell, global governance is at the nexus of all these other issues. So people go, the New World Order and the One World Government is just a conspiracy. Well, the movers and shakers are literally talking about it. So, hey, I'm not saying it's going to come to pass. I'm not saying there's not going to be massive resistance to it. I'm just saying there has to be massive resistance to it, or otherwise it will come to pass. This all-englobing empire very much frowns on the idea of any particular population democratically deciding to take another path. Kind of like Belarus recently, right? When hey, look, I'm not saying I'm a fan of Alexander Lukashenko, but you can see they're trying to flip Belarus because he decided not to take the bribe from the IMF and the World Bank that required him to do all the things they wanted him to do, to crash his economy, introduce curfews, lock down the economy, introduce all these restrictions. He wouldn't do it. And so what do they try and do? They try and get rid of these people then. Regime change. With these astroturfed color revolutions, they pump in money from outside and try and make it look like, all that propaganda. And unfortunately, it seems that a lot of people in those protests are falling for it. These risk becoming isolated from global norms, putting these nations at risk of becoming the laggards of the new digital economy, warns Schwab. Any sense of autonomy and grassroots belonging is regarded as a threat from Schwab's imperialist perspective, and is due to be eradicated under the Fourth Industrial Revolution. No wonder they're against actual nationalism. He writes, individuals used to identify their lives most closely with a place, an ethnic group, a particular culture, or even a language. The advent of online engagement and increased exposure to ideas from other cultures means that identities are now more fungible than previously. Thanks to the combination of historical migration patterns and low-cost connectivity, family structures are being redefined. Genuine democracy essentially falls into the same category. For Schwab, he knows that most people will not willingly go along with plans to destroy their lives and enslave them to a global techno-fascist system of exploitation. So giving them a say in the matter is simply not an option. This is why the stakeholder concept has been so important for Schwab's project. As discussed above, this is the negation of democracy, with its emphasis instead on reaching out across stakeholder groups for solution building. Okay, I'm going to move forward here a little bit. So for Schwab, now ultimately where we're going to be leading to is how the pandemic, COVID-19, the plandemic, factors into all of this. Never let a good crisis go to waste, is what I would say at this point, especially one that you manufacture yourself. For Schwab, the role of the state is to advance capitalist aims, not to hold them up to any form of scrutiny. While he is all in favor of the state's role in enabling corporate takeover of our lives, he is less keen about its regulatory function, which might slow down the inflow of profit into private hands, and so he envisages, and this is a quote, the development of ecosystems of private regulators competing in markets. In his 2018 book, Schwab discusses the problem of pesky regulations and how best to overcome these limits in the context of data and privacy. He comes up with a suggestion of public-private data sharing agreements that break glass in case of emergency. These come into play only under... Again, this is actually a quote from him. These come into play only under pre-agreed emergency circumstances, such as a pandemic. Wow. And one happened literally 2 years after that book was published, and can help reduce delays and improve the coordination of first responders, temporarily allowing data sharing that would be illegal under normal circumstances. Funnily enough, 2 years later, there was indeed a pandemic. and these pre-agreed emergency circumstances became a reality. It's almost like it was a plan or something. I don't know, was there a plan? These shouldn't have been too much of a surprise for Schwab, since his World Economic Forum had co-hosted the infamous Event 201 conference in October 2019, which modeled a fictional coronavirus pandemic. And I mean, it's just so transparent at this stage. And he wasted little time in bringing out a new book, COVID-19: The Great Reset, co-authored by Thierry, I'm presuming that's French, Malloret, who runs something called the Monthly Barometer, a succinct predictive analysis provided to private investors, global CEOs, and opinion and decision makers. And there's the book there. Published in July 2020, the book sets out in advance conjectures and ideas about what the post-pandemic world might and perhaps should look like. The next paragraph is really interesting. Schwab and Marley admit that COVID-19 is one of the least deadly pandemics the world has experienced over the last 2,000 years. Adding that the consequences of COVID-19 in terms of health and mortality will be mild compared to previous pandemics. They added, what are we still doing? What are we still doing? This information is there. What are we still doing? I mean, it's like, how do we reach the normies with this information, ladies and gentlemen? They add, it does not constitute an existential threat or a shock that will leave its imprint on the world's population for decades. And yet, if the media and the government and the likes of the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and so forth, if they weren't telling us that we were living in this great pandemic, 2020 wouldn't look and feel all that different to 2019. Yet incredibly, this mild illness is simultaneously presented as the excuse for unprecedented social change under the banner of the Great Reset. And although they explicitly declare that COVID-19 does not constitute a major shock, the authors repeatedly deploy the same term to describe the broader impact of the crisis. Schwab and Marley place COVID-19 in a long tradition of events which have facilitated sudden and significant changes to our societies. I mean, at a certain point, I just think these guys don't even care about the virus. They're like, look, shut up, whatever. Just put out some fake data, do the PCR thing until the population are sufficiently scared and we've crashed the economy, and let's just get on with the Great Reset already, okay? That seems to be like the attitude. It's like, yeah, whatever. We don't even care about the truth. We don't even care, okay? Just do what you're told. This is why our politicians are never going to come to their senses. This is what I said in my previous video. They're not going to listen to us. So we have to make sure that we red pill as many people with a proper, genuine grassroots awakening. Because we have to have mass civil disobedience. We just simply cannot continue to comply with this. And businesses should be reopening. Even the engineers behind the crisis itself admit there is no serious cause for concern with this virus. Even the World Health Organization recently came out, and I have that article, by the way. Let me pull that one up. And they've basically said that COVID-19 is no deadlier than the flu. And this was an article on WND. And it says, new World Health Organization estimate puts coronavirus death rate at only 0.13%. UN body's figure in March was 26 times higher. I'm going a little bit off script here, but lost in the reporting of the World Health Organization's new estimate that about 760 million people, more than 20 times the confirmed cases, have been infected by the coronavirus worldwide is the impact on the estimated survival rate. If indeed 760 million people have been infected at some point during the outbreak, and the number of confirmed deaths is about 1 million, again, with, as opposed to from, right? So what did death certificates mean? How many of those people had underlying conditions? How many of them were just put down as COVID? But anyway, let's not get into that again. As it says here, that the number of confirmed deaths is about 1 million. Then that would mean that the infection fatality rate is only 0.13%. That's a little more than 0.1%, which the World Health Organization says is the rate for the seasonal flu. So the World Health Organization's estimate in March of a death rate of 3.4% sparked panic worldwide, fueling the catastrophic lockdowns. But now it's like it's all coming out, and you just have to wonder at what point did the public go, I mean, are they capable of actually viewing this, thinking about it and going, shit, we were lied to. But instead they just carry on, continue wearing the masks. You know, it seems that the conditioning now is, and the behavioral conditioning, I should say, the modifications to how people behave and act, they're swept up in it. It's almost like you can't really reason with them, at least right now. But I do still think a lot of people are waking up, and but it's going to be months and months and months before you're going to really start to see that on the ground, especially here in Ireland. Let's get back to the Winter Oak article on Klaus Schwab. He's such a Schwab guy, isn't he? They specifically invoke the Second World War. World War II was the quintessential transformational war, triggering not only fundamental changes to the global order and the global economy, but also entailing radical shifts in social attitudes and beliefs that eventually paved the way for radically new policies and social contract provisions, like women joining the workforce before becoming voters. There are obviously fundamental similarities between a pandemic and a war that we will consider in some detail in the following pages, but the magnitude of their transformative power is comparable. Both have the potential to be transformative crisis of previously unimaginable proportions. And then the article continues, they also join many contemporary conspiracy theorists in making a direct comparison between COVID-19 and 9/11. And it says this is what happened after the terrorist attacks of the 11th of September 2001 all around the world. New security measures like employing widespread cameras, requiring electronic ID cards, and logging employees or visitors in and out become the norm. And this is the thing, the social distancing stickers are not meant to go away. When I first saw all that crap coming into the shops and the visors and the plexiglass, I said, this is meant to be permanent. Because, Harry Vox had said this when he read the Rockefeller document in 2014, which is about the Rockefeller document of 2010. And he was saying, again, 6 years ago, he said, this is what they want to do. They want to basically, it's like the TSA, but for everything, right? Tighter security absolutely everywhere. And they want to bring in lockdowns, curfews, and all this kind of stuff. And this is what Harry Vox said at the time. Now, Harry Vox was of the belief that if there was ever a populist uprising of the people, that basically that they would release Ebola or something like that. But in the end, what they went with was a relatively weak virus, because you don't want to lose control of a really hardcore virus, right? You don't want to do that. That's because that could kill the globalists as well, and the people that they need to enforce it locally, enforce the lockdowns and the restrictions and locally. So that, in other words, the police, the governments that you need to be your middlemen in all of this. So you release a weak one, and we can talk more about that in an upcoming video, actually, that I'm going to be putting out on BitChute. Might be a bit too spicy for YouTube. At that time, these measures were deemed extreme, but today they are used everywhere and considered normal. Yeah, it'd be nice if airport security returned to the way it was before. When any tyrant declares the right to rule over a population without taking their views into account, they like to justify their dictatorship with the claim that they are morally entitled to do so because they are enlightened. The same is true of the COVID-fueled tyranny of Schwab's Great Reset, which the book categorizes as enlightened leadership, adding some leaders and decision makers who were already at the forefront of the fight against climate change may want to take advantage of the shock inflicted by the pandemic to implement long-lasting and wider environmental changes. They will, in effect, make good use of the pandemic by not letting the crisis go to waste. Because you can do things you couldn't do before, of course. The global capitalist ruling elite have certainly been doing their best to take advantage of the shock inflicted by the panic, assuring us all since the very earliest days of the outbreak that for some unfathomable reason, nothing in our lives could ever be the same again. And this is what Boris Johnson was saying. Oh, everything's going to go back to normal, and then contradicts himself for the rest of his speech, going, things are not going back to normal. That's great, Boris. Thanks very much. The global capitalist ruling elite have certainly been doing their best to take advantage. Okay, so Schwab and Marley are inevitably enthusiastic in their use of the new normal framing, despite their admission that the virus was only ever mild. It is our defining moment, they crow. Many things will change forever. A new world will emerge. The societal upheaval unleashed by COVID-19 will last for years. And there's a picture there of people standing like zombies all lined up with this. I mean, human beings cannot go on like this. A species cannot flourish if it's afraid of itself and treating each other like we're all sick when we're actually perfectly healthy, and under suspicion that we're all carrying a bioweapon and we could all get someone somewhere killed or get each other sick and all this kind of thing. This is just, it's incredible that so many of our brothers and sisters in this society actually think that this is okay. But like I said before, it was very difficult to get this through to people after 9/11. I remember the first time I went through airport security. And I was like, I can't believe this. I cannot believe people are going along with this. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And then there was body scanners, and people are literally getting scanned down to their underwear. And you're like, people just do not value their freedom at all, you know? But at a certain point, you hit rock bottom, and then that failure to value your freedom, it's going to bite you in the ass at some point. And you're going to wish that you had it done. The societal upheaval unleashed by COVID-19 will last for years and possibly generations. Many of us are pondering when things will return to normal. The short response is never. That's a quote from the man behind the Great Reset, which is being pushed globally. You're hearing the term Build Back Better. You're hearing talk about more climate change stuff, redesigning cities. Okay, I'm going to get in more into this in an upcoming video. This is sort of like the first part of that. But more cycle lanes, less cars on the road, more public transport, green this, green that. All the Build Back Better stuff, and the fact that we all have to be sustainable, and we all, some people have to work from home, and I guess every other industries have to be completely torched. Mass unemployment, but it's for the good of the environment, I guess, right? To fight the invisible bogeyman of climate change, which is based on shitty science, and it was never true. They even go so far as proposing a new historical separation between the pre-pandemic era and the post-pandemic world. They write, radical changes of such consequence are coming that some pundits have referred to as before coronavirus, BC, and after coronavirus, AC era. We will continue to be surprised by both the rapidity and unexpected nature of these changes as they conflate with each other, kind of like a year zero type situation. That's what it sounds like to me. They will provoke second, third, fourth, and more order consequences, cascading effects, and unforeseen outcomes. In so doing, they will shape a new normal radically different from the one we will be progressively leaving behind. Many of our beliefs and assumptions about what the world could or should look like will be shattered in the process. In other words, human beings will not be living like human beings. They will be living like automatons, like machines, like reprogrammable machines. I wonder sometimes about what's going to be in that vaccine. Read into that what you will. Back in 2016, Schwab was looking ahead to new ways of using technology to change behavior. Again, I wonder what's going to be in that vaccine. And predicting the scale and breadth of the unfolding technological revolution will usher in economic, social and cultural changes of such phenomenal proportions that they are almost impossible to envisage. One way in which we had hoped his technocratic agenda would be advanced. One way in which he had hoped his technocratic agenda would be advanced was, as we have noted, through the phony solutions to climate change proposed by fake green capitalists. Under the title Environmental Reset, Schwab and Marley state at first glance, the pandemic and the environment might seem to be only distantly related cousins, but they are much closer and more intertwined than we think. Yeah, the virus is a smokescreen for the other smokescreen. Climate change is just a power grab anyway. One of the connections is that both the climate and virus crisis have been used by the World Economic Forum, and they like to push their agenda of global governance. As Schwab and his co-author put it, they are global in nature and therefore can only be properly addressed by a globally coordinated fashion. Again, global problems require global solutions. So he says another link is the way that the post-pandemic economy and the green economy involve massive profits for largely the same sectors of big business, and that's why SMEs are toast. And if anybody knows any restaurants or pubs or such businesses in Ireland, and they're like, oh, we're just kind of sitting here furloughing workers. God, I hate that word. And I never actually heard of it before 2020, sorry. But and they're like, oh, we're just kind of battening down and seeing when the government will let us open again. They won't. I think it was the Beastie Boys who said, you got to fight for your right to party. And this is the thing, you're going to have to fight for your right to stay in business. Otherwise, large corporations are just going to, take over completely, and there's going to be no competition left. And the COVID-19 has evidently been great news for those capitalists hoping to cash in on environmental destruction, when Schwab and Marley are reporting the conviction that ESG strategies benefited from the pandemic and are most likely to benefit further is corroborated by various surveys and reports. Early data shows that the sustainability sector outperformed conventional funds during the first quarter of 2020. The capitalist sharks of the so-called sustainability sector are rubbing their hands together with glee at the prospect of all the money they stand to make from the COVID pretexted great fascist reset in which the state is instrumentalized to fund their hypocritical profiteering. And they say here, there's a quote, the key to crowding private capital into new sources of nature-positive economic value will be to shift key policy levers and public finance incentives as part of a wider economic reset. I'm going to skip forward a little bit here. Fate is obviously smiling on Klaus Schwab as this COVID-19 crisis has happily succeeded in advancing pretty much every aspect of the agenda he has been promoting over the decades. Thus, he and Marley report with satisfaction that the pandemic will fast forward the adoption of automation in the workplace and the introduction of more robots in our personal and professional lives. Lockdowns across the world have, needless to say, provided a big financial boost to those business offering online shopping. The authors recount consumers need products, and if they can't shop, they will inevitably resort to purchasing them online. As the habit kicks in, people who had never shopped online before will become comfortable with doing so, while people who were part-time online shoppers before will presumably rely on it more. This was made evident during the lockdowns. In the US, Amazon and Walmart hired a combined 250,000 workers to keep up with the increase in demand and built massive infrastructure to deliver online. This accelerating growth of e-commerce means that the giants of the online retail industry are likely to emerge from the crisis even stronger than they were in the pre-pandemic era. They add, as more and diverse things and services are brought to us via mobiles and computers, companies and sectors as disparate as e-commerce, contactless operations, digital content, robots and drone deliveries, to name just a few, will thrive. It is not by accident that firms like Alibaba, Amazon, Netflix or Zoom emerged as winners from the lockdowns. By way of corollary, we might suggest that it is not by accident that governments, which have been captured and controlled by big business, thanks to the likes of the World Economic Forum, have imposed a new reality under which big business are the winners. The COVID-inspired good news never stops for all the business sectors which stand to benefit from the fourth industrial revolution. The pandemic may prove to be a boon for online education. Schwab and Marley report in Asia, the shift to online education has been particularly notable, with a sharp increase in students' digital enrollments, much higher valuation for online education business, and more capital available for ed tech startups. In the summer of 2020, the direction of the trend seems clear. The world of education. Oh man, it's just living a pod life. I do not want. Who the hell wants to spend so much time alone in front of a computer screen? Online sports have also taken off. For a while, social distancing may constrain the practice of certain sports, which will in turn benefit the ever more powerful expansion of esports. Tech and digital are never far away. It's so stupid seeing these football players playing in empty stadiums while they pump in artificial crowd chanting and sounds. It's just absolutely daft. There's similar news to the banking sector. Online banking interactions have risen to 90%. I wonder at some point, are they going to talk about cashless society? Because that's the other thing. And we can just continue on here. The culture of the fascist new normal will also provide lucrative spin-off benefits for particular business sectors such as the packing industry. Explain Schwab and Marley. The pandemic will certainly heighten our focus on hygiene and new obsession. Obsessive compulsive disorder about it. A new obsession with cleanliness will particularly entail an unhealthy level of obsession with cleanliness, which will likely make people more sick because they're sterilizing everything and failing to expose themselves with useful, good bacteria and viruses to build up their immune systems. But I guess everybody's lost their minds and forgotten common sense. Not all that common, it seems. With particularly entail the creation of new forms of packaging. We will be encouraged, just listen to this, not to touch the products we buy. Simple pleasures like smelling a melon or squeezing a fruit will be frowned upon and may even become a thing of the past. This is an actual quote. The authors also describe, just again, this is what's in Klaus Schwab's head. The authors also describe what sounds very much like a technocratic profit-related agenda behind the social distancing, which has been such a key element of the COVID reset. So, this is what social distancing is really all about. Obviously, it's a control measure, among many other things, but this is what it's all about. They write, in one form or another, social and physical distancing measures are likely to persist after the pandemic itself subsides. Well, to all the people who thought this was all going to end once they got the vaccine, think again. This is the new normal, the new world order, justifying the decision in many companies from different industries to accelerate automation, you see? So it's the idea that if human beings can't be in close proximity, they can't work together as effectively in various industries and jobs. Because, human beings are now all sick. They're all cursed. They're cursed people. We're all ill, disgusting bags of festering viruses. So they can't work together. Human beings can't be around each other. It can only be in groups of 6, remember? And then, there has to be all this space. And the rule of 6 thing, that's just designed to make sure that no political dissent ever happens so they can crush things like uprisings and protests. But in workplaces, factories, or any other industry, that kind of thing, it's about keeping people away from each other so that basically businesses become unprofitable, unworkable, and certain industries are no longer sustainable. Good news! Good news. Automation will resolve that. Robotics will resolve that problem. Yeah. Just go humanless with your business. See? After a while, the enduring concerns about technological unemployment will recede as societies emphasize the need to restructure the workplace in a way that minimizes close human contact. Indeed, automation technologies are particularly well suited to a world in which human beings can't get too close to each other or are willing to reduce their interactions. I cannot believe I'm living in this time. I can't believe that this time could possibly ever exist. That actually something like that could be written by someone with enormous global influence. And that we're living through this. Good Lord, these people. May God have mercy on their souls. They're going to need it. Our lingering and possibly lasting fear of being infected with a virus, COVID-19, or another. There's another one on the way. It's like they're like buses, will thus speed the relentless march of automation, particularly in the fields most susceptible to automation. That's a quote. Okay? This is what's in Schwab's head. Again, as previously mentioned, Schwab has long been frustrated by all those tiresome regulations which stop capitalists from making as much money as they would like to by focusing on economically irrelevant concerns such as the safety and well-being of human beings. Why would you care about that? But hooray! The COVID crisis has provided the perfect excuse for doing away with great swaths of these outmoded impediments to prosperity and growth. Humans. One area in which meddlesome red tape is being abandoned is health. Why would any right-minded stakeholder imagine that any particular obligation for care and diligence should be allowed to impinge on the profitability of this particular business sector? Schwab and Marley are overjoyed to know that telemedicine will benefit considerably from the COVID emergency. Yeah, so imagine someone trying to give themselves a breast exam to see if they've got a tumor, or someone, or a man trying to give himself a prostate exam over Skype or something, right? So, the doctor's on the other side of the screen, and doctors will be incentivized to do this kind of thing. No, you have to be able to go into a doctor's office. It's absolute madness. But of course, it says here, the necessity to address the pandemic with any means available, plus during the outbreak, the need to protect health workers by allowing them to work remotely, removed some of the regulatory and legislative impediments related to the adoption of telemedicine. I'm telling you, we need to go back. We need to go back to dial-up internet, okay? So we can get off. Ditch the smartphones and the tablets. Feck it. I'm now realizing my past career as a tech journalist was a mistake. The ditching of regulations is a general phenomenon under the new normal global regime, and Schwab and Marley relate. To date, governments have often slowed the pace of adoption of new technologies by lengthy ponderings about what the best regulatory framework should look like. But as the example of telemedicine and drone delivery is now showing, a dramatic acceleration forced by necessity is possible. Yeah, so if you remove regulations, you can also remove health and safety concerns. During the lockdowns, a quasi-global relaxation of regulations that had previously hampered progress in domains where the technology had been available for years suddenly happened because there was no better or other choice available. What was until recently unthinkable suddenly became possible. New regulations will stay in place. They add the current imperative to propel, no matter what, the contactless economy, cashless society, and the subsequent willingness of regulators to speed it up means that there are no holes barred. So they're just getting away with whatever they've wanted. They're getting, this really is, for globalists like this, for the technocrats, for the elites, this is all their Christmases coming at once. Man, I wish humanity wasn't so bloody docile. So it's clear from Schwab and Marley's work that the fascistic merging of state and business to the advantage of the latter underpins their Great Reset. I'm going to move forward here because you can read the whole thing. It is a great read, and there's a lot in there to consider. But I just wanted to move on because, as you might imagine, the sheer brute force that never lies far beneath the surface of the capitalist system becomes increasingly visible when it enters its fascist stage, and this is very much in evidence in Schwab and Marley's book. The word force is deployed time and time again in the context of COVID-19. Sometimes this is in a business context, as with the statements that COVID-19 has forced all the banks to accelerate a digital transformation that is now here to stay, or that the micro reset will force every company in every industry to experiment new ways of doing business, working and operating. Just like pubs and bars and restaurants and other businesses were forced to adopt all the bullshit social distancing, which makes them unprofitable. But sometimes it is applied directly to human beings or consumers, and Schwab and his ilk prefer to think of us. It says, during the lockdowns, many consumers previously reluctant to rely too heavily on digital applications and services were forced to change their habits almost overnight. Watching movies online instead of going to the cinema, having meals delivered instead of going out to restaurants. God damn. Talking to friends remotely instead of meeting them in the flesh. Our homes are becoming prisons, and the internet is the thing that is keeping us shackled and keeping us away from each other. Like, this is what we're supposed to do instead. Talking to colleagues on a screen instead of chit-chatting at the coffee machine. Exercising online instead of going to the gym. And so on. Many of the tech behaviors that we were forced to adopt during confinement will, through familiarity, become more natural. So, in other words, oh man, I need a time machine. I don't know whether to go forward very far or go back quite a bit. But, yeah, it's all Pavlovian. It's just dog training. They've retrained human beings to be anything other than human. As social and physical distancing persist, relying more on digital platforms to communicate at work or seek advice or order something will little by little gain ground on formerly ingrained habits. The species is doomed. And that's exactly how transhumanist agenda succeeds. The species can't stand being around each other. They can't be with each other any longer. How the hell are people ever supposed to breed again or have romantic relations? Or just friendships or communities? I mean, it's just, that's it, we cannot allow this hell to happen. And people need to see this. They need to read this. They need to understand it. Under a fascist system, individuals are not offered the choice as to whether they want to comply with its demands or not. So too under communism, I would say. As Schwab and Marley make quite clear regarding so-called contact tracing, no voluntary contact tracing app will work if people are unwilling to provide their own personal data to the governmental agency that monitors the system. If any individual refuses to download the app and therefore to withhold information about a possible infection, movements and contacts, everyone will be adversely affected. This, they reflect, is another great advantage of the COVID crisis over the environmental one, which might have been used to impose their new normal. While for a pandemic, a majority of citizens will tend to agree with the necessity to impose coercive measures, they will resist constraining policies in the case of environmental risks where the evidence can be disputed. Exactly, and that's what Rosa Koire said. The environmental thing, the climate change agenda was not succeeding in bringing about the kind of totalitarian world they needed. So to push that agenda, they needed an earlier link in the chain, another, something else to map onto it. They needed an excuse to push it through. And COVID lines up pretty well with helping them push it through. So let's move on a little bit more. They talk about greater surveillance and things like that. So coercive measures of one kind or another are also likely to be used to force people to take the COVID vaccines currently being lined up. And you can see how that would happen. Not being able to hold down a job, not being able to go anywhere or travel or even, maybe get on the bus or go shopping or, unless you have the vaccine. So there's all sorts of pressure points that they can push people and coerce them. Schwab is deeply connected to that world, being on a first name basis with Bill Gates and having been hailed by Big Pharma mainstay Henry McKinnell, chairman and CEO of Pfizer Incorporated, as a person truly dedicated to a truly noble cause. So Bill Gates looks to me in this whole Great Reset, looks to be a very important big piece of the puzzle. But he's one piece. and it seems that the World Economic Forum is a very significant piece of it as well as Klaus Schwab. So it is not surprising that he insists with Marley that a full return to normal, whatever that is, cannot be envisaged before vaccine is available. He adds the next hurdle is the political challenge of vaccinating enough people worldwide. We are collectively as strong as the weakest link, which actually makes absolutely no scientific sense from the point of view of an actual vaccine that would work. Again, you can't develop a vaccine in such a short period of time. No, I'm not anti-vax. Just don't believe that you can develop a vaccine that quickly, because there's no evidence that you can. Vaccines usually take about 10 years to make safe. But as he says here, that we are collectively as strong as the weakest link. What? If your vaccine works and you get vaccinated, you don't have to worry about the person who isn't vaccinated. With a high enough compliance rate, despite the rise of anti-vaxxers. Anti-vaxxers thus join Schwab's list of threats to his project, along with anti-globalization and anti-capitalist protesters. So he's talking about the yellow vests and also those engaged in class conflicts, societal resistance and political backlash. The majority of the world's population have already been excluded from decision-making processes by the lack of democracy, which Schwab wants to accentuate through his stakeholderist corporate domination, his agile governance, his totalitarian system management of human existence. But how does he envisage dealing with the... What kind of an upbringing do you have to become this much of a colossal, megalomaniacal prick? Seriously, like what? This is the reason, Absolute evil truly exists as a force. Absolute good as well. God, the devil. This is absolute Satanism, and it exists in these people. It festers in their sorry excuse for his soul. But how does he envisage dealing with the somber scenario of people rising up against his great new normalist reset and his transhumanist fourth industrial revolution? What degree of force and coercive measures would he be prepared to accept in order to ensure the dawning of his technocratic new age? The question is a chilling one, but we should also bear in mind the historical example of the 20th century regime in which Schwab was born. Hitler's new Nazi normal was meant to last for 1,000 years, but came crashing down 988 years ahead of target. And hopefully we can do the same to this one, I would say. We don't have to accept their new normal. So he concludes, the author concludes by saying, we don't have to accept their new normal. We don't have to go along with their fear-mongering. We don't have to take their vaccines. We don't have to let them implant us with smartphones or edit our DNA. We don't have to walk muzzled and submissive straight into their transhumanist hell. Very well said. There's more there. I'm going to leave it there. It's an excellent article, and you can read the entire thing from the link below. And I'll just read the last couple of lines here. They are scared of our potential power because they know that if we stand up, we will defeat them. We can bring their project crashing down before it has even properly started. We are the people. We are the 99%. And together we can grab back our freedom from the deadly jaws of the fascist machine. Very well said. Great article. I will have more on the Great Reset and other manifestations of it in other countries. Watch out for more green agenda stuff coming to a city and town near you. If you're starting to see your politicians or media pipe up about that just in time for COVID. COVID has enabled us to do this and that, and it's allowed us to see the world and the blah, 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 blah. So we've got this great opportunity. COVID really is, I know it's terrible, but it's also kind of, it's been a curse, but a little bit of a blessing, because now we can, right? You're going to see all of that kind of stuff. I do apologize for the length of this video, but unfortunately, as you can see, there's a lot of detail there, and I had to be thorough with it. So I hope you got a lot out of it. And really, again, wonderful article. This may seem very depressing to read, but the truth of the matter is, it's good that we know this. Okay, and it's good this is being exposed. People are asking the question, hashtag, why are they doing this on Twitter? And what's coming up time and time again is the Great Reset, the Great Reset, the Great Reset, and the World Economic Forum. We're now seeing, and this is the thing, we're seeing the evil behind the mask. And what's most important is that it appears to be the last terrible, awful evil left in the world. And I mean that, this is the most genocidal, hateful, anti-humanist, anti-freedom, totalitarian regime. We're living, actually, when you think about it, we have this privileged opportunity to destroy the greatest evil, the greatest threat to freedom in the history of time. And it's right here. It's right before us. And when we take down these people, when we destroy the engine of their machine, it's over. And we can rebuild a genuine new normal, a better, far better normal than the one that we had, and the one that they're certainly better than the one they want to build for us. You know, we can reshape everything, including our economic system. That we're not beholden. Our children are not going to be born into debt slavery and this usury system. So yeah, we can really make democracy work for us again. There's a great opportunity here, and we just have to continue to keep pushing on. And the thing is, like, everyone knows on some level that it's not worth living in their world. So what have we got to lose? Really? Absolutely nothing. We've nothing left to lose, because they're going to take everything that matters to us and that means anything to us if they succeed. So this is it. This is the play. It's winner takes all. And guess what? We're going to win. And then these bastards are going to wonder how they ever thought for a second that they were going to succeed. All right, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.